So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create an exe file using the Pyinstaller for any sort of Python script for your Python software, whatever you created. And I'm also going to show you how you can avoid the most common mistakes that I've been doing for the last 10 years using the Pyinstaller. There's a lot of things that can go wrong using the Pyinstaller, especially when you use multiple Python versions with a lot of external repositories, because there are some repositories that don't include certain functionalities that you would pass as an argument in the Pyinstaller, but more on this later. So let's jump right into it. So the most important thing when you have a Python project, let's say you use an IDE like I do, like Visual Studio or like Pycharm, is whether you are using a global or a local virtual environment. So in order to figure this out, by default it's going to be a local virtual environment that, for instance, Pycharm sets up for your current project. You will find this under settings. If you haven't set it up yet, you will see it as I do here. Then you can actually add a local interpreter. You will have to figure out whether you want to use a new one or a global one. It will set it up, and then you will have a local project interpreter for your new project. And we can test if we can run this script here really quick. And you see what the software is supposed to do. So now let's say, okay, I want to make this exe file. In order to do this, you need to install Pyinstaller. This is the first thing where you have to be aware of the difference of local project interpreters, local global environments, local virtual environments versus the global virtual environments. And just to give you an idea how this can look, I have here my virtual environments. These are all local virtual environments for certain projects that are all a little bit different. And when you want to work with local virtual environments using the Pyinstaller, technically what you would have to do is you would have to set up a Pyinstaller for each of these virtual environments. Obviously, you can lose track of it, and especially if you run multiple Python versions and you run multiple, like you have 30 projects at the same time, obviously you will lose track of it, and it's not a very efficient or a very smart way to go about it. So what I usually like to do, and maybe this is not the best way to do it, I usually use the users appdata roaming Python, because they're usually, like, by default this is a location where you would find virtual environments. These I use for my global virtual environment. So I have here two Python versions. Python 37 is the one I want to use, and in the side packages folder there's going to be all these repositories that I've been using in the past that I'm going to use in the future, and I try to keep this up to date as best as I can. We will see in a second why this is important using the Pyinstaller. And in the scripts you will have your pip installed, and this is where we have to install the Pyinstaller now. So I suggest, and if you take one thing from this video, is use a global virtual environment, something like I'm using right here, and install the Pyinstaller here, so that for every Python 37 project you're going to be able to reference to this global virtual environment. So then when you use the Pyinstaller and you create your exe file, you know that you take the right packages from the right global virtual environment. So in order for us to install the Pyinstaller, what we're going to do is we're going to open a command prompt here in the scripts folder. So just again, this is user appdata roaming Python 37 scripts, and we're going to install Pyinstaller by calling pip install Pyinstaller. This should take about like 10 seconds. Maybe if it looks a little bit different here, maybe you have some yellow lines asking you for upgrading pip. Don't worry, it's only important that it says here successfully installed Pyinstaller 5.11, and you will see here that it's correct if we have the Pyinstaller exe here, and under side packages you will see that there is a couple of new folders created. Now let's say we want to go back to our test2 and we want to create an exe file for this Python script. So what we're gonna be doing, and this is the very old-fashioned religious sort of way to do this, is to actually go to your project folder. You're going to open a command prompt here and you're going to say Pyinstaller --one file. You can also say one directory if you want to have like one folder where all your dependencies are going to be installed in. I usually do the one file so that it compresses everything into one exe file, and then the file name, so test2.py. And now it's going to create the exe file. It's going to, you see this here, it's going to go to our global virtual environment by default, and it's going to take the side packages from there as well. This can take maybe like 1 or 2 minutes, depending on, for this really small script, it's going to be very fast, but depending on the size of your project, this can be also a little bit longer, like 1 or 2 minutes. Then you have 2 new folders in your project directory, build and dist, and the distribution is where you're going to find your exe file. So we can double click this right now, and what you see, it doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because I purposefully removed the matplotlib from my global virtual environment just to show you, okay, you know how important it is to keep these up to date and to make sure that all of your used repositories that you're using in your local project are also installed in your global virtual environment. So what we're going to have to do to fix this is we have to go back to our global virtual environment. I mean, if this happens to you, you would have to check all of the repositories that you're including in your project and have to make sure that all of them are installed in your global virtual environment. For me, I know already it's just matplotlib that I'm going to have to install. So I'm going to go here to scripts, open a CMD and say pip install matplotlib. And now it's going to install matplotlib. Again, if there's any yellow lines here, don't get confused or whatsoever. It's always only important that it says here successfully installed and then the repository that you installed. So we can close this, we go back to our project folder, and we're going to delete these folders. And now I'm going to open a command prompt and I'm going to say pyinstaller --1 file test2.py. And now it's going to create the exe file again, but now it can obviously reference to the matplotlib in our global virtual environment and everything is going to be fine. So here we have the 2 newly created folders again, and in distribution you will find the test2exe, and now it will be working. You will see it opens these 3 graphs here, and we can now distribute this exe file. We can certify it, you can do whatever you want with it, share it with your coworkers, with your clients. So I told you already that there's situations where this is not going to work, so you can run into some problems with some repositories that you include that are not compatible with this one file option. And to give you an example for this, I have this other software prepared for you here, and it runs a repository, or it includes a repository called customtkinter. This customtkinter class, maybe you remember these old looking graphical user interfaces using the tkinter class. There are newer versions of the tkinter class, customtkinter or CTK for short, and it looks something like this. It looks a little bit more modern. You can include these icons here. You have these more modern user controls. It gives the whole thing a little bit more fresher look. It gives you advanced controls. You can use multiple sorts of themes with different preset colors. It's a very useful class, I think, if you want to also include graphical user interfaces in Python. But the main downside to using customtkinter is obviously you cannot use the --1 file. And I will show you what happens when we create an exe for this project. So the py file is called LATPILES. So I'm going to open a CMD in my project folder, and I'm going to say pyinstaller --1 file LATPILES.py. And what's a little bit misleading here is that it actually will create the exe file, but it will also include the customtkinter repository, but it won't be able to run afterwards because the customtkinter class is simply not compatible with the --1 file option. So far, it is the only repository that I've found that cannot support this --1 file option. So here in this case, we have to use the --1 directory option. I'm going to show you how this looks in a second. So first of all, let's run this really quick. And you will see that for a split second here, you will get a lot of notifications. I have copied the code so that you can get an idea what it says. So here you see the JSON theme file for customtkinter couldn't be found. If packaging with Pyinstaller was used, have a look at the wiki. And on the wiki, when you go there, it actually will say, okay, the --1 file doesn't work. So You mustn't use the --1 file in general. You can always also make a project folder with all the local dependencies and having the exa included there. It's certainly a version that always will work, but I will show you really quick what we're going to have to do to solve this problem. This is going to be the same command that we used before, where we have the Pyinstaller called. We have, instead of the one file, we have the one directory here, and in the end here you will see that we can actually change this, I think, to the LATPILES.py. The only difference that what we have to do here is we have to manually add the data for the customtkinter class, because it actually contains like JSON files, like OTF files, and these are not compatible with this one file option, and in Pyinstaller we have to add them manually in order for it to work. So I'm also going to include this command line here in the video description so that you can copy it from there. Otherwise, you can also go to the documentation page if you're more interested in this, and you can read the documentation for customtkinter using the Pyinstaller. And so what we are going to do is we copy this command line and we're going to open the command prompt here in the project folder. We're going to paste it, and now you will see that it's going to do the same thing. It's going to create the exa file, but instead of like one singular compressed exa where everything is included, you're going to have a project folder where all the local dependencies are going to be installed into. Now, if we open the dist folder, you will see that there is a LATPILES directory. We can open it. You will see that there's all these repositories installed in these folders. You will have a lot of local dependencies, and what we're going to have is the LATPILES exa here. And if we run it now, you will see that it's going to work. It's going to open this program here. And now you can obviously compress the folder into a zip archive or whatever and distribute it this way. Or you can create a setup file for this project, whatever you like to do. So I also wanted to show you a little bit more elegant way on how to do this than to actually access the project directory, open a command prompt and paste this command. So Pycharm actually has a feature called external tools. I will show you in a second where you will find it. Let's just show you what it does. You can right click, let's say, on this test2.py that we compressed earlier, and you can go to external tools down here. And I created an external tool called the Pyinstaller. When I click this, it will basically do the exact same thing. And the good thing is I don't have to access the project directory, open a command prompt and paste this command in there. So it will also reference to the global virtual environment. And I will show you how you can create this yourself. So you go to File, Settings, and in the Settings section you will have Tools. And in the Tools you will have External Tools. If there's nothing displayed here, you can just create another one using the plus. I have the Pyinstaller here, so I'm just going to edit this, and basically you have to input these information. You can put any name you want. I will call this the Pyinstaller 37 because it is the Pyinstaller that is referencing to the global virtual environment for Python 37. And here you can see, okay, it also passes the one file, --1 file as an argument, and the file path it's going to get and retrieve when I do the right click on this py file. Then it's going to retrieve the file path of this Python file, and the working directory where it's going to input the files is going to be the project file directory. So with this being said, I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions regarding the Pyinstaller or creating any sort of exa file for your Python application, then don't hesitate contacting me. You can also write a comment under this video, and with this being said, thank you for watching and goodbye.